Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the Stars, Stripes, and Sanatanis podcast, run by second-generation Hindu-American teens. It's for teens, by teens. If you haven't already, please take a look at our last 4 episodes. My name is Samyuktha Ramanan, and you may remember me as the co-host of our second episode regarding the swastika. I live in California, and I'm a high school senior.
And my name is Sowmya Mambakam, and this is my first time as a co-host on this podcast. I'm also a high school senior. I go to the same school as Samyuktha, and I am really, really happy to be here.
Welcome, Sowmya. And this is the return of the West Coast crew.
So, without further ado, let's get started.
So, Sowmya, the topic of this episode, as you may have guessed from the title, is, insert drum roll, feminism and Hinduism. We're going to discuss whether Hinduism is a patriarchal, chauvinistic, misogynistic...
All right, I think I get it.
Okay, we're going to discuss a few questions. What does Hinduism say about women? How were women treated in ancient Hindu history? And if applicable, how does Hinduism intersect with modern-day feminism?
Well, going back to the very roots of Hinduism, what's really interesting is that it's one of the only major religions today that venerates goddesses as well as gods. One of the branches of Hinduism is Shaktism, in which devotees venerate Shakti as the supreme goddess, and of course, even other denominations like Vaishnavism and Shaivism worship goddesses like Lakshmi and Parvati as well.
I completely agree, Sowmya. And I've at least not seen many other religions give so much importance to deities as Hinduism does. We have an innumerable number of verses on them, from Shri Sati about Shri Devi, to Mate Malaya Dwaja about Parvati Devi, to Saraswati Namastubhyam on Saraswati Devi. When starting many of our tasks, we pray to Devis to bless us with fortune and success in them. Some examples are, so before showering, we pray to Ganga, Yamuna, Narmada, and many other goddesses of the rivers. Before taking a math test, we pray to Saraswati Devi. And before eating, we always say this slokam to Parvati Devi. Annapurne Sadapurne Shankara Prana Vallabhe Jnana Vairagya Siddhartam Bhiksham Dehi Cha Parvati.
You pray for success in eating?
Kinda, okay. You're asking her for knowledge, wealth, a good life, and alms, or food.
Okay, that makes sense. We call upon goddesses for any number of daily tasks then. And I think that's really well represented in how many of our festivals and our pujas also emphasize the importance of the Devis and the presence of women and girls at these festivals and pujas in particular. So, for example, taking Navaratri, which is one of the most popular Hindu festivals all across India, is all about celebrating Devi. And the people who are most often participating in this festival and going to sing at their friends' houses are women and young girls.
Totally agree. And in the Ramayana, related side note, when Rama didn't have Sita with him to perform the Ashwamedha Yajna, he had to create this solid gold statue of her to even start the puja. So some pujas, you can't even do them without a woman being present. And in Navaratri, back to the point, there's this special puja just to celebrate the sacredness of girls.
Oh, is that the Kanya Puja?
Exactly, the Kanya Puja. I remember celebrating this as a kid, where we would go to the Kovil, or temple. The pujari would make us all sit in rows facing Devi. He would touch our feet and shower us with markers, colored pencils, and anything a little girl would want. It's amazing how much value our culture has for femininity.
Yeah, I don't remember doing that, but it does sound really cool, and the way you describe it just makes it sound so fun and exciting. And just like girls have this kind of place in our festivals and our pujas, women have always had a place in Hinduism from the earliest times. So going all the way back to the Vedas, which are the eternal truth in Hinduism that were, revealed to the rishis very, 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 very...
Is that word starting to sound weird to you too?
Right. Very long ago.
Very true.
Exactly. The mantras of those Vedas were revealed to a number of rishikas as well as rishis, rishikas being female rishis. I think that this is a pretty good sign that Hinduism and the knowledge contained within, encapsulated in the Vedas, has always been for everyone.
I love that, Sowmya. And also, Sowmya, okay, so I have this really cool slokam that venerates Devi and women and describes their qualities.
Go ahead, bro.
Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha
Okay, that sounds great, but what does it mean? I understand the last line, which is salutations to her, salutations to her, salutations to her.
Exactly. And the first part means to that Devi who lives in all beings in the form of Shakti, power, strength. And then,
Salutations to her, salutations to her, salutations to her again and again.
exactly, yeah. This is a part of a many verse text that describes Devi as embodying our consciousness and residing in us as our consciousness, as a mother, in kindness, in forgiveness, and so much more.
Wow, that is really cool. And it also reminds me of a certain part of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is listing the qualities that are the most important in women, because he is saying that among women, I, the supreme being, am these qualities. And those are fame, prosperity, speech, memory, intelligence, endurance, and forgiveness. So, based on this, we can see that the Hindu ideal of women is one who is a good human being, as shown by having forgiveness and good speech, but also one who is strong, having endurance, and intelligent, with excellent memory. In addition, there are many aspects of Hinduism that are personified as female themselves.
Ooh, like bhakti?
Good guess. But you're right. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's explained that bhakti is present whenever the Bhagavatam is recited. And in this explanation, bhakti appears as a woman, with her two sons, which are Jnanam and Vairagyam. In some parts of North India, even, I know Radha in the Krishna Lila is seen as a personification of bhakti and devotion to Krishna.
Whoa, that's amazing. So, as Radha is like bhakti, and is that kind of like Shakti is the vital energy inside us, but also the Devi Parvati?
Yeah, like we mentioned, the whole sampradayam of Shaktism is where their soul Devi is Shakti and all other goddesses are manifestations of Shakti that way.
Oh, wow. And I think the organization Shaktitva promotes this female centered, Devi centered part of Hinduism. It's amazing how diverse our culture is. There's so much of it I haven't even heard about, let alone studied yet.
Well, I know something you have studied. Bhakti, while being personified as a woman, has also been demonstrated really well by many women throughout Hinduism.
And one of them from Tamil Nadu in Srivilliputtur is my and Samya's idol. And you haven't guessed yet? It's Andar. She is the first and only female Arvar. Pretty groundbreaking, I would say. During her childhood, her only goal was to unite with Perumal or Vishnu. And during the month of Margali, she woke up every one of her friends early and brought them to the temple to pray. The 30 verses she wrote during this period are called the Tirupave, which people like us sing to this day. There is no arranged marriage situation going on here, for sure.
Yeah, in fact, it's said that the marriage that occurred between her and Sri Ranganatha, Srirangam, happened when she just went straight into the Sannidhi and she just kind of merged with the Murti and Perumal or Vishnu in that way. And even some of the other Arvars, who are all male, such as, Andar's own father, Periyarvar, wrote from the perspective of women themselves. Periyarvar wrote the Neeratam from the perspective of Yashoda, who was asking Krishna to come and take a bath. So even the male poets of Hinduism recognize the importance of women, and the importance of women specifically as exemplars of bhakti and devotion.
That's so beautiful. I can imagine Periyarvar being, as Yashoda, asking Krishna to bath, chiding him, and giving him food, and that's so beautiful. And another lady of amazing poetic talent we will discuss, whom I just learned of recently, is Lal Ded. She was a Kashmiri Hindu woman who escaped an abusive family, renounced the world for Shiva, and became a genius at Kashmiri Bhakta poetry. I've heard that every Kashmiri Pandit has some of her sayings on the tip of his tongue, and the Kashmiri language is full of her sayings.
Her story is really inspiring to many young women who may be facing difficult situations such as hers today, too.
So true, she's an inspiration to all of us. And another woman we will discuss is
Atukurimola. She is a Telugu woman who was the daughter of a potter and is known for writing a popular Telugu version of the Ramayana.
Daughter of a potter, nice. So in Sanskritam, we have the Valmiki Ramayana. In Tamil, we have the Kamba Ramayana. In Awadhi, we have the Tulsidas Ramayana.
Yep, and in Telugu, we have the Molla Ramayanam. She was just a common woman with a humble pottery background, and yet today she is regarded as a great poet of one of the most revered texts in all of Hinduism.
Amazing. And yet another woman poet, this time from the north, is Meerabhai.
Yo, is she the one who everyone learns bhajans from for dance?
Yes, exactly. She's known for her Meera bhajans that most classical dance forms, such as Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Odissi, and many others, have pieces in. My dance school teaches many Meera bhajans to our students, as they remain a huge part of our culture today.
Yeah, so we have these four women from different parts of ancient Hindu history and the medieval period who speak different languages and worship different gods and goddesses, and they're all revered strongholds of our religion.
Now we transition to more modern women and various other fields. One woman I look up to a lot is Rani of Jhansi, who was not only a queen in the 19th century, but fought bravely in battle to protect the kingdom of Maratha from the British. During the Indian Rebellion of 1857, when East India Company allies tried to split her state in two, she assembled a fort and was able to defeat them in battle.
Wow, the way you describe that is just really so epic, and I can really see why she became a symbol of resistance to the British Empire for Hindus all across the country.
Exactly, and not just the country, but across the world. There's this famous picture of her on a horse holding a sword and her baby, charging into battle, which truly shows her fierceness and passion for her state.
Yep, no thought of stereotypes or what people would think stopped her from fiercely defending her state and riding into battle.
Exactly. Our next person is one an HSC high school team member described to us, and we were truly amazed by how much she has done for Hinduism.
She is Ahalyabai Holkar, known for building temples broken by colonizers and warfare.
I saw the map of temples she restored, and it's awesome, like literally awesome.
Yeah, there must have been at least 100 temples on there.
Exactly, yeah.
And one notable temple specifically that she rebuilt was Kashi Vishwanath, which is a temple dedicated to Shiva in Uttar Pradesh.
Well, I've heard that temple is so sacred to Shaivites everywhere. I didn't know she was the one who built it.
Yeah, so many women have done so much for Hinduism and, through Hinduism and around Hinduism.
And inside Hinduism.
Very funny. So, a lot of what we've talked about here so far, though, is from India and Hinduism in kind of the earlier periods and the scriptures. But obviously, Hindus have been in India under a number of Hindu kingdoms, and then, of course, the Mughal Empire and the Sultanates, along with other Hindu kingdoms that ran concurrently during that time. And then, of course, yay, colonialism, and the British came in. And of course, there have historically been Hindus outside of India in places like Nepal, Indonesia, Cambodia, and of course, in the diaspora in the United States and the Caribbean. So it's not like the status of women in actual Hindu society, just like Hinduism itself, has ever been static and unchanging.
Okay, first, you're like the first person I've heard say, yay, colonialism. Okay, Sowmya. But exactly, there's a difference between how women were treated in their religion and in society. Like we said about the treatment of LGBTQ plus community in our last episode, when going to check it out, the status of women changed in society, and this was informed by religion. We can only say that Hinduism says XYZ, that they are respected, that they were pure, by looking at our scriptures.
Exactly. And in the modern day, life obviously looks very different than it did in ancient Hindu societies. Hindu women, like all women, face different problems than they did, than they did back in the olden times.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many examples that I can think about. Sexism in the workplace,
General sexualization of women,
higher standards of behavior,
catcalling,
abuse rates,
victim blaming. Yeah, y'all get the idea.
And especially with the recent events, such as in Florida a week ago, abuse and sexual assault rates and straight up murder have increased. The thing is, as Hindus, our religion definitely respects women and forbids such behavior. And we can even use our texts to stop and advocate against these attacks that are happening. For example, the Vishnu Purana has a line stating that a man should not sleep with a woman who is unwilling, angry, pregnant, menstruating, or sick.
So lines like these definitely speak very strongly against assault and even just value general well-being of a woman's mental state as well as her bodily autonomy. And they definitely say to treat women well. Unfortunately, what the religion says and what people do don't always match up, sadly, and we can never guarantee that women were treated exactly as the Hindu tenets say they should be, and they should have been in the ancient times. But what we do have are the tenets themselves, and the important thing to do is to remember to uphold these values.
Exactly, and this is really, really important. Society and religion may be different, but we all aspire to be better Hindus who follow the texts much better. And the texts themselves say that that these are not okay. And looking at Vedanta especially, one should follow the path of Vidya Maya in order to reach Brahman, or the ultimate goal of Hindus. The Arishad Vargas, excessive desire, greed, and are the six vices which pull one towards avidya maya, the path away from truth, and towards immorality.
So basically, the Arishad Vargas reinforce the ego and pull you onto a darker path. And since heinous acts like assault aim to assert physical power over someone due to arrogance, anger, desire, or lust, or whatever, it's a huge no-no, both by Hindu tenets and also just using general morality.
Definitely. Vedantic ethics essentially give you a platform to condemn everything from judging a woman's worth off her clothes to assault to street harassment. Vedanta, the concluding message of the Vedas, is the core of Hindu dharma and has contributions from the women of the Vedas, and is the key to using Hindu philosophy to combat the continued injustices that women face today.
And even when it comes to things like victim blaming, we know that everyone is responsible for their own karma and their own actions. And of course, many times assault is blamed on, woman's modesty or the way she dresses or something equally as stupid as that. But blaming survivors of sexism and assault, whether they are women, men, or another gender or sexual minority, is not right. And if you do not hold the doer of the immoral action accountable, then you're going against Hindu principles.
Exactly. So to project anger for the sake of holding on to perceived social norms means you care more for your ego than for dharma, which is a big no-no in Hinduism. And anyone who says it's traditional to do so has not decolonized their understanding of dharmic tradition and does not represent us.
Speaking of decolonization, Samyu, when looking through the lens of Western feminism, many Hindu practices and rituals may seem misogynistic. You know about any of those?
I do. And one example is Rakhi or Raksha Bandhan.
So this one I think is especially important to discuss since it's been portrayed as misogynistic by Hindus who don't really understand the true meaning of the festival.
Exactly. When looking upon it from a Western perspective, where women might have been treated less than men or not equal, it might seem like it's misogynistic. And this is really saddening because it's actually the opposite. The first occurrence of this was when Indrani Devi tied a Raksha thread on the wrist of her husband Lord Indra, which saved his life in a fierce battle, which Krishna told Yudhishthira in the Mahabharata. It's a fun fact. And following then, pujaris used to tie the sacred thread around members of the village. And later on, sisters tied it around the wrists of their brothers to protect them in battle. And even today, my mom ties it around her brother's wrist every year for this auspicious festival. It highlights the strength and importance of women, and isn't misogynistic at all when you look at the meaning behind the rituals.
True, but Samyukta, what about menstruation and the taboo on that?
Oh boy, this is a pretty big topic, bringing up some controversial issues, are we?
Well, that's kind of our job.
That's true, and I think it's really important to talk about it because my own friend a few months ago came up to me and talked about how unfair it was that she couldn't go to the temple during, periods. And their usual attitudes towards menstruation, and it's in which girls are shamed or shunned, is the byproduct of cultural clashes and colonization and the ignorance of our own scriptures, and represents those changing social values we talked about earlier. In ancient times, women usually stayed in their rooms and rested while on their period in order to avoid cramps and, general tiredness because of hormones and all that.
Yeah, but how does the temple issue come in here specifically?
Well, just like how people can't enter the temple without taking a shower, usually for spiritual reasons, those who are on their menstruation period are asked to wait until they have taken a head shower on the fourth day of their period to enter the temple. It is also thought that going to a temple while on your period can overload your lower chakras and therefore cause health problems due to the excess of energy. The periods already activate your lower chakras, and going to the temple does that to a much higher magnitude, which can cause heavier bleeding. And this is from a book called Ritu Vaidya by Sinu Joseph, which we highly recommend checking out. It's about the science behind our menstrual practices.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that you can still definitely be on your period and enter a temple after you take a head shower after those 3 days. So it's not like the act of menstruation itself is unhygienic or anything, because if once you've taken that head shower, you basically have free reign to go wherever you want.
Exactly. So it's not like we consider, blood or anything to be, oh, ew, disgusting. No, of course not. And anyone who says that is being misogynistic.
One more fun fact about menstruation, if you can call it such a thing. In the Chenganur temple in Kerala, the Devi there is said to menstruate for 3 days during the month, and they celebrate a festival known as Tripurat, which is considered as a symbol of fertility. And this festival is connected with the menstruation ceremony, which is then observed periodically in the temple. And that is why this temple is also considered as Shakti Pita.
That's so beautiful. So with these amazing traditions and the fact that we consider this period of fertility sacred, why do so many Hindu girls think this tradition is misogynistic?
I think a part of the problem is maybe that Hindu girls themselves might not be aware of these explanations. Like, I've seen people get mad because others call it a hygiene issue when they say that, menstruation is unhygienic. But do you think that knowing more about the spiritual aspect helped you understand the reasoning better, Samyu?
Exactly. Yeah, I understood that it wasn't misogynistic. You're such a big brain, Sowmya.
Thank you. Here, I'm going to be even more big brain. I think that's why it's so incredibly important to respect women and avoid any misogynistic actions in everyday life. It's when this misogyny and the social status of women gets, weirdly kind of conflated with these practices that are spiritual, first and foremost, and not social, that the unfair label of calling all these practices misogynistic arises in the first place.
So true. And I think both the points you made in this are in your previous statement are so important. So if you do a lot of misogynistic things, then these traditions, which may not be misogynistic, might seem misogynistic because you may be labeled as a misogynist. And that kind of makes sense, right? So avoiding misogynistic actions will play a big role in, getting the idea out that these traditions are misogynistic. And second, that the difference between spiritual practices and the social practices. And we have to take care to separate these two. And one of the biggest questions we as Hindu women have to answer is, can we be feminists without subjecting Hinduism to colonial era stereotypes?
I think we can. I think we have to take care to educate people and actively decolonize our tradition from other potentially misogynistic social mores that we may have picked up. But it's definitely possible to do that separation. And we have to take care not to fall for that narrative that, all Hinduism is patriarchy.
Such a common phrase. However, at the same time, we must not be defensive when misogyny in the community and continued discrimination exists. For example, against the Isai Valluvu community.
Mm-hmm. And when we see people being discriminated against on a religious basis or otherwise as a justification for misogyny, it's our job to call this out and, educate people. So decolonized dharmic feminism is the answer to reclaiming our tradition and liberating women.
I love that. And I think the organization Shakti fights for this exact thing. The word dharmic feminism is something that they use to fight against modern day feminism using Hindu tropes and Hindu stories. So for our viewers, we ask you to consider whether you have, whether intentionally or unintentionally, acted in a misogynistic and discriminatory way, and reflect upon whether Hinduism actually sanctions that kind of behavior.
Yep. And always make sure that you fully learn the reasoning and explanation behind our practices, and think about how you can empower and stand up for women yourself.
Definitely. And if you have ever faced misogyny or bullying based on your gender, know that Hinduism supports you in every single way. All these verses we've talked about today are here for you. And so are we. We're here for you to back you up and fight for your rights. Hinduism provides a great framework for fighting against any kind of discrimination. But it's up to everyone to use these resources, after all.
Absolutely.
That's it, folks. Make sure to tune in for our episode next week, where we'll be talking to students from Rutgers University about the recent events concerning Hinduism there.
In the meantime, follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.
I'm Samyuktha.
And I'm Sowmya.
And we're the West Coast crew. Signing off for today.